Hey folks, welcome back to Sunset Falls. We have a lot to do today, so please bear with us. A few things we want to get out of the way. One, we're going to have a few housekeeping items based on the district we built out last time, or a few times ago maybe, Autumn Square. We have a few changes we want to make there. Second thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about our highway planning. I have a lot to go through in terms of what we want to do with highways for the city. And I think we want to talk a little bit more in depth about what we want to do there. Then three is we still have a huge residential demand. And to be honest with you, we need a population of around 9,000 to get the vast majority of our transportation options opening to us. So I think what we'd like to do is start to build out some of our downtown grid. It doesn't have to be permanent, it just has to be there, right? Build out some of our downtown grid so that we can fill in some high density population and really hit that 9,000 level to unlock a lot of our transportation options, right? So first things first, let's tackle what we want to change over in Autumn Square. And it's relatively minimal, but I do think that we want to put in a few schools. So something we did last time when we looked through the policies here is that we instituted schools out, right? And I was watching a bit of a video earlier ago, and I'll link it to you, or link it here for you so that you can see what I'm seeing. But you made a really good point that if you read the fine text of this policy, it says that citizens will prefer working over education. Only a small portion of the eligible citizens will go to study in the university. So this is a really key point. These citizens still need elementary and high school educations. And if you look at the education makeup here, you'll see that they don't have any elementary schools and they don't have any high schools. That's a problem. So we should go ahead and fix that. And what I'd like to do, I think, is put an elementary school right there and put a high school potentially right next to the bus station. So that's going to give people more access there and fix that mistake. In terms of our police opportunity too, I think we want to put maybe one more little kind of police station. Actually, let me take that back. I don't think we want to use that police station. We have this nope, never mind. I thought we had a rural police station option, but we don't. So let's go with this police station option. There we go. Got a little police right there. Okay, so that was the first thing we wanted to do. Autumn Square population is right next to our larger mining industry here. I'm hoping that the prospect mineral industry will finally hit its required worker level because Lord knows we got enough resource units here. So hopefully we're going to see the right worker level. Okay, the second thing I'd like to talk about is our plan for the highways within kind of the urban core here. So let's do a brief recap about what our plans are here, right? I know we talked about doing kind of three major things. We'd like a more planned city component that's going to evoke concepts of DC with sort of government focus, right? I think something austere, something that looks planned, something that has a lot of public services, public space, and somewhere where we assume the seat of government would be in this region, right? Second place we like to work on is kind of a quintessential old town, right? This is going to be a place that potentially was the kind of origin point of the city, probably an industrial space, a space that has industrial buildings that have been converted into something that's potentially a little more urban or residential or recreational, something where they're not used for their intended purpose anymore, right? So some sort of old town. I'm anticipating a lot of maybe older forms of transportation there, so maybe a train depot, maybe a repurposed wharf or pier, something like that, right? That's going to be really dependent on location and where we see the best fit for location is, right? And then the third thing that we want to do is just quintessential urban, high density, thinking Manhattan, Singapore, downtown Paris, Berlin, any sort of Asian, European, American kind of large city, right? Sydney, right? We want to include Australia too. So any sort of evocative, I don't even know if that's a word, anything that evokes a major metropolitan area. We want kind of that dense core idea of what an urban space looks like. And I think that'll be really, really cool. So those are the three different ideas that we want to fit into this larger portion of land, right? But the question is, how do you move between those, right? So we have this highway that's kind of been started. Oh, started for us here, right? And it's kind of setting us up with a few different options. And we'll see that we kind of turn this highway into more ground level transportation right here because we were just starting out, right? But I think this is something we want to be really intentional about. And there are a few reasons that I think that. But the primary reason is that basically highways really drive a lot more urban planning decisions than you might originally think. And I wanted to take a second to really just kind of talk through the history of highways and how they impact the cities that host them, right? And how highways are being perceived within the context of their history and why they were put there, but B, how city planners are looking at highways in the 21st century and how highways are being either A, reconceived or B, planned moving forward to be put into situations that are more coexisting with cities in a positive relationship. So I kind of want to caveat that I am not a city planner. This is just kind of my understanding of city planning within the context of highways based on my own experiences and research and where I live in the Northeast. I live in a city that has a major highway running through it. And so this is something that's relatively personal to me in terms of my community. But I also just kind of wanted to give people who maybe have some idea of the history, but not all of it, the larger context as to why highways are so important for American city planning and American transportation. So, full disclosure, this is going to be a little bit more in depth than you might expect from, essentially a video game Let's Play. So if you are not here for the history and you're here for the building, feel free to skip ahead to the next marked section in this video. But if you are interested in the history and you want to learn a little bit more about the history of American highways and how American highways have impacted American cities, feel free to listen on for the next little bit, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So let's start at the beginning. The American modern highway system started post-World War II in 1956, when President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, which funded 90% of almost 41,000 miles of interstate highways. This was post-World War II, right? So in America, we saw a lot of new appliances, new features, new kind of things people could own. This American materialism dramatically increased as American quality of life increased. This increase also brought about a need for more home space to put these things in, right? And that was one of the myriad of factors that pushed a lot of Americans to start moving into suburbs and expand out of city cores, right? There were a variety of reasons, but definitely one of them, right? And as we saw this kind of overall move into the suburbs, we also saw a rise in vehicle ownership, right? So I think roughly 60% of Americans owned vehicles in the post-World War II era. That's up to like 85 or 90% today. And a lot of how urban planning was developed was surrounding and centered by vehicular traffic, right? So post-World War II, urban planners were looking at vehicle traffic as the primary transit option for those living in suburban spaces to transition into the city, either for work or recreation. And they kind of worked off this human body metaphor for traffic, right? Seeing traffic as the blood flow in a city, seeing kind of that city core as the heart of the city, and then seeing the highway system as the arteries that deliver blood in and out of the community. Unfortunately, a lot of communities were disproportionately negatively impacted by highways. It's impossible to talk about the decision-making process on where to put these highways without talking about the reality of segregated America in the 1950s and 60s. These policies disproportionately affected Black Americans, non-white Americans, and were put into place by primarily white government officials, local leaders, and wealthy business owners to really marginalize Black and non-white Americans. So you may have heard of the policy of redlining, right? And this is something that I'd kind of heard about, way back in history class. But I had to look up a modern definition for this video because I wanted to be precise in how I define this. So my understanding of redlining right now is that this was a practice, a policy by the federal government, by private mortgage lenders, and by banks, where they systemically denied home loans to Black Americans, and in some cases deliberately, intentionally restricted selling homes to Black Americans in specific, usually predominantly white neighborhoods, right? So the way this worked is there was a federal housing administration in post-World War II America that basically went through and color-coded maps of every major metropolitan area And the color coding was based on how risky it would be to insure a mortgage in that space. Basically, anywhere that was either primarily a place where Black Americans lived or even adjacent to primarily Black neighborhoods was deemed risky on this map and colored red, right? So, it created this system, this policy that furthered segregation efforts at the time by just refusing to insure those mortgages. And at the same time, the Federal Housing Administration was subsidizing builders who were creating these huge subdivisions primarily for white Americans, where they put in a requirement that none of these homes could be sold to Black Americans. So it was an intentional policy that had a pretty huge impact on how cities were laid out and the diversity or the makeup of these cities, right? And unfortunately, what happened is when the highway planning was being done, a lot of these Black neighborhoods were being associated wrongfully in planning minds with either crime or low income, or just places they frankly didn't care about as much as predominantly white city planners and white politicians. And so those are the neighborhoods that were destroyed to build highways. And I think it's hard to understate the scale of how much this has changed the impact of 20th century city planning. If you look at where these interstates that go through major metropolitan areas were built essentially on the rubble of Black neighborhoods. And if you look at the number of Black homeowners and business owners who were displaced from their neighborhoods to build these highways. So I-95 that went through the Overton neighborhood in Miami, Florida, they just destroyed that neighborhood, large portions of that neighborhood to put the highway into place. I-81 went through the 15th Ward in Syracuse in upstate New York. They, I believe, destroyed over like 300 individual properties to make way for that. Like it's a 1.4 mile section of highway, and they destroyed hundreds of businesses and homes to make way for that. I-95 again goes through Jackson Ward in Richmond, Virginia, and they again routed that through a predominantly Black neighborhood. So not only are you having predominantly Black residents having their livelihoods disrupted and their homes destroyed to make way for these highways, but then the Black residents who stayed in the area, right, these districts and these locations right next to the highways, would then disproportionately suffer the negative effects of those highways. So something I think people tend to underestimate is the impact of both noise and air pollution on residents who are directly adjacent to highways. Air pollution has been proven to increase respiratory function and heart function. So, an increase in asthma attacks is something that has been definitely noted among those who live close to highways. Impaired heart function, impaired lung function. These are all some of the ramifications of living close to highways, and this is something that has really impacted the communities that are close to the highways. So there is some good news. And the good news is that a lot of 21st century city planners are recognizing the mistakes of the past and they're working to bring these highways down or to redevelop these highways into more sustainable and more equitable areas of the city. So I want to pull up a few examples and I want to talk through how these cities have created their own alternatives to a highway system and then how we're going to do that in Sunset Falls. So in Boston, if any of you are from Boston, you may be familiar with the potentially omnipresent Big Dig project, right? Uh, Part of I-93 that's been called part of Boston's central artery, right? Remember this body metaphor with the artery highways. They actually moved a large section of I-93 underground into a tunnel as part of the Big Dig. So they moved all that traffic underground and they were able to reclaim that space to create more than 45 different parks and public plazas. So not only are you moving the traffic underneath the earth and you're moving some of that pollution underneath, but you're also reclaiming what's very valuable land, sometimes in the middle of these incredibly urban, incredibly expensive cities, right? So this happened again in San Francisco after there was an earthquake in 1991. Actually, sorry, I believe the earthquake is in 1989, and then the highway itself was damaged in the earthquake. They brought it down in 91, and what that did was open up access to the entire San Francisco waterfront. San Francisco is probably has some of the most expensive real estate values in the entire world, right? And they saw the land value in that highway space and adjacent to that highway space rise by 300%. after that highway came down. I'm going to throw up this picture of the famous wharf, right? The highway used to run right in front of the wharf. I had no idea until I was able to see some of these photos. The before and after here, really incredible. They're proposing to do this in all other kinds of cities as well. I know a lot of cities in upstate New York are considering this, Buffalo and Rochester. You also have cities down even in the south as well, and cities in the west. I'm from the Northeast, so I'm a little bit more familiar kind of with some of those upstate New York plans. But there are cities all over the country that are heavily reconsidering how they're routing traffic through their cities. So this is something that I think we want to learn from and something we want to try to implement in Sunset Falls. So the first rule I'm going to self-impose is that we are going to, by all means possible, not run highways through the urban areas of the city. So, what I mean by that is, I think highways definitely still have a place in Sunset Falls, but they're going to be a regional connective corridor, right? So, we're going to be able to connect the downtown area to the more rural farmland areas or potentially the uh, industry developments out kind of in the mining up in the mountains, right? Highways can work to get you from one area to another area, but they shouldn't be going through developed areas. So, what we're going to do is when you come off that highway into an urban area, we want to bring you down to the ground level and then provide best in class public transportation and city roads that can get you where you need to go. So we're going to give this a shot and see how it works. And I want to kind of it's just ensure that nobody thinks I'm taking a dig at anyone who's building highways in their cities, right? At least as an American, I take a highway almost every time I'm going more than 15 or 20 minutes around my city, right? Highways are almost a daily part of life for the vast majority of Americans who live in major metropolitan areas. They're also even more essential to a lot of Americans who live in rural spaces where you do need that highway development to get to other cities or other urban areas. So highways are really core to America and just recognizing the scale of the country, right? And I don't want to say that anyone who's building cities that look like where they live, right, is doing something wrong. But I think what's so cool about having a city like this and being able to create the city that we want to see is also kind of create a city that we want to live in too, right? And so for me, I think, not only would I like to live in a city that doesn't necessarily have highways breaking up those neighborhoods and experience the impact of those highways, those ill effects, right? But I also want to take this as a creative challenge that hundreds of city planners in America are going through right now in terms of how can we return this highway traffic to the streets? How can we provide better public transportation so we have fewer cars going through these urban areas? And how do we reclaim some of this really valuable land to provide better services for our citizens? So, I'm not a city planner. This is not my area of expertise. If I've said anything that's incorrect, please let me know so I can update that because this is just supposed to be a kind of quick historical look at the history of highways, and I'd like to be accurate in that. But I also think it's valuable to understand that history, to understand kind of the method for us moving forward, what we're attempting to achieve, and why it's important, right? So given that, we're going to go get started and talk about some of the major avenues and boulevards through the city that are going to replace either sunken or elevated highways in our space and help disperse that same traffic through Sunset Falls. Okay, so now that I've explained the reasoning behind our highway approach, I think we should start looking at what are the major arterial routes through the city right now. What do we need to beef up in terms of lanes? And how can we start planning out a little bit of space so that we can get our additional residential space in and just get our numbers up to the point at which we can safely start to unlock some of our transportation options, right? So one thing you might be noticing is, hey, this bridge wasn't here last episode. You missed a whole lot of very painful workthroughs with some of the new bridges. You'll note that this is one of the new bridges from the content creator pack. But you missed some really painful working through with a different bridge mod that we'll talk about later because I still think there's an opportunity to use that bridge. But the less said about that, the better. So I think the main takeaway here is that I do think that shifting to a roundabout here makes the most sense coming off of this highway interchange because of the different spaces we're going to have in this area. If you disagree with me, please let me know. I'm really curious to get your thoughts in the comment what you think about using this kind of roundabout as a natural extension of the highway. I'm not sold on this 100% yet. So if you think there's a better way to handle this highway traffic and disperse it throughout the city, please let me know. But what I do think we are going to do is take this, what is this, essentially a 2-lane road with a passing lane. I think we want to beef this up. We're going to go 6-lane road, decorative trees. We're just going to go as big as possible. You know, do we want to do bike lanes? Do we want to do bus lanes? I don't think it matters right now. And the reason I say that is because I think with the decorative trees, it's going to be about the same width, so we don't have to worry about it. We are going to destroy a ton of buildings, a ton of businesses. There's just really no way around it. We just have to do it. We're just going to have to take the L here, you know? I don't know why this is giving us a hard time. I'm going to delete all of these businesses so we don't run into an issue. I'm sorry, business owners. This is progress right here. So I hate to break it to you, but we have to do it. So let's move some of the stuff out of the way. And this will be a pretty consistent theme, honestly, of this episode is we are going to be deleting a lot of stuff. You know, there's some weird behavior there. I'm not 100% sure why those roads are acting that way, but that probably explains why we're having a hard time building through here. That space is already occupied. Well, I can fix that. We're going to delete. Well, no, I guess we're not going to do that. Let's see if we can select all of these things. I'm sorry, people who have homes there. We're deleting all of it. I know. Okay. So we now at least have our main road through here with some connections. We're going to another roundabout. We're probably going to change that later, not gonna lie, but we can leave that here for now. Dean Street, you suck. Sorry, no offense to the Deans out there, but I'm a big fan of Empire Street. We're going to keep Empire Street going. We're actually going to carry Empire Street all the way across this bridge. We'll fix that later, don't worry about it. Okay, never mind, already take that back. We're going to go just to here. All right, so we have our Empire Street. Let's reconnect a few of these roads. Oops, roads here. And we'll use, I guess, just the regular ones for now. It doesn't really matter that much, honestly. And we're going to connect this up here, actually. Space already occupied. You're killing me. Occupied by what? These houses? Not anymore. I just want to be clear. I'm not taking a vindictive pleasure in removing these people from their homes. Just to be clear here. But we do, in fact, need to recognize that a lot of these spaces are going to need to make way for our larger ambitions with this space. And actually, I think this is a good example of where we can now start reusing this space. So I think we would like to pull a lot of this back, especially a lot of this retail. Let's kind of just let that all disappear for a second. Here, zip up here. Doesn't really seem to be doing anything yet, but we actually want to rezone a lot of this as high density commercial, I believe. And we'll see how this impacts the specific area, but I think we'd like to go high density residential, commercial for this kind of main thoroughfare here. And we'll see what people make of it as we get through here. But that's what we're going to do in this area specifically. Let's rezone a little bit of that. There we go. Okay. So now we have kind of our main thoroughfare entering the city here. I think the other road that we're potentially going to want to upgrade is this road here, Rosemary Davies Avenue, goes all the way underneath our mountain here and comes out right here. So this is a hugely important road that ends up kind of bifurcating into these two roads here. That's interesting, this behavior right here. Where does this road? I think we want to bring that road right up there. There we go. So this bifurcates into Scarlet Street and Primrose Street. I'm fine with those names. I don't really care that much. But I think we want to expand this road and bring this all the way down here as the road type that it is. So let's grab a little bit of that and start upgrading. We're going to make this another major thoroughfare road here. Okay, so that's tricky. It is considered a 4-lane road with tram tracks. I think we switch it to a 4-lane road with trees, maybe right here. Come right down there. There we go. All right, so who's unhappy right now? Is that road. Okay, we can fix that. They need tram tracks right there. Okay, cool. Why are you upset right there? What are you upset about? I don't know. Sounds like a problem for another day. We'll focus on that later. Okay. Curving. Do we like the idea of the street curving? I don't love this. Let's pull this back. Let's do a slightly different approach. We're going to take this road, come down here at a 90-degree angle, and then a little bit further, and then slant right in here. There we go. That gives us a little bit of a more kind of focused option. And then we're going to go 80 degrees actually all the way out here. There we go. I think we just kind of need to make some stronger road structures in here that are going to give us some definition when we actually go to fill out the city proper, right? So what we're doing here is we have a little bit more definition in kind of the major avenues that'll take us through the city. And I think we could actually probably put one more arterial kind of right here. We'll go, actually, can we square it up on this road? So what I kind of want to do here is take this idea. We're gonna have some trees, and I think we're just gonna go 10 units out, to be honest with you. How do we, nope, that's gonna be challenging. I don't think we want to deal with that too much. Let's take this out. We're gonna go at a 90-degree angle here because I think anything else is just frankly gonna be really challenging to build on. So let's actually do this. I know that I'm deleting everything I just did. We're actually gonna just go straight down at 90 degrees right there. We can still connect this road up here. That's fine. But now we're gonna go 90 degrees out here. And that's just gonna give us a stronger base to actually build our grid off of, right? And I think we just wanna do classic 10 units out, 10 units down right there. But what we want to do is also acknowledge that these are, you know, in terms of roadway hierarchy, I think these would probably be considered an arterial. Actually, it's technically 4 lanes, but I think that's okay. So we want to have some collectors coming off of this. And I think what we can do is actually shift our collectors to maybe every other in this case, right? So we're going to come down this way. And right now, I think we're just going to build 4 over. And then what we can do is put in essentially some connectors here that aren't going to go all the way through. So we'll connect every 2, just like this, and then potentially include streets here that don't go all the way through, right? So they're just going to kind of go like this. And I don't know if I love this yet, to be totally honest with you. I definitely don't love the idea of them connecting, so I'm already changing my mind here, and they are going to connect. But that's okay. You know what? Nothing is permanent. And again, while we're building here, I think we do have to acknowledge that we're not building anything that won't potentially get totally destroyed. And I say that not to be pessimistic, right? But rather to acknowledge that we are going to rebuild pretty large components of the city over time. It's just a given, especially because we want to acknowledge that, you know, part of a city's growth is in how it changes over time. And specifically in this area, I don't know why I can't get, there we go, can't get these to line up. But specifically in this area, we're acknowledging that we're trying to build a bunch of high residential or high density residential with the explicit purpose of growing up our city enough so that we can start to build out our public transit infrastructure. So I expect that a lot of this will be subject to change, but I'm trying to just build in enough here in these blocks that we can get something going on, and then we will kind of resculpt a lot of this area. So don't worry too much about what we're doing here because it is all subject to change. So what I'm trying to do is actually just kind of essentially move this out here so it's not so close to our main thoroughfare here. And so we're going to take 4 blocks here, do kind of our 4 blocks of retail there, and then take 4 blocks of high density retail along this road because we want to give a little bit of a noise buffer here. And then we're going to take our high density housing and put it everywhere else and just kind of see what emerges from this. So keep in mind, we're still going to need to put in all of our basic services, also things like water, which I am not good at remembering to do prior to setting up these homes. So hopefully people weren't moving in immediately. But we are going to give water along kind of every other street here to make sure we have full coverage. I don't think we have to worry, that's weird. I don't think we have to worry as much about our electric capacity because I think that we'll connect pretty quickly. I could be mistaken, but let's find out. Yeah, so that's okay. I think we have enough demand over here. hopefully some commercial demand over here. You know, we can always do this if we need to, and then put in maybe a few houses right here. We'll figure this out if we run into some major issues, but I think we can be okay there. Let's see what happens if we do that. Okay, so we must have connected up somewhere. Okay, awesome. Starting to see, admittedly, a lot of these houses look really, really similar, but we are seeing the type of, you know, extreme housing increases that we were hoping to see. All right, so let's start to put in some essential services here. We're going to throw in a larger police station here and hopefully sneak in this fire station as well. Back to back. Love it. Fire helicopter depot is definitely something we should think about. I think we could have sort of air campus in here somewhere. I think potentially on kind of the, whoa, hey, awesome. We have finally hit mineral industry level 2. Took us literal years, it feels like, but we are finally there. So that's great to see. I wonder if it was just from that influx of workers there, but we finally hit that. Let's take a look at that in the next episode because I'm really excited about that. I think we can really expand that industry, but I think we want to finish what we're starting over here with the beginning of our kind of residential grid here. And again, I don't love how this, we're really just kind of trying to hit that population increase at this point so we can unlock those transportation options. And I think theoretically, really just get some more options for how we're doing this. So this is more so just trying to unlock our transportation, and then we'll rework this space. Boom, there we go, right on time. Look at everything we just unlocked. Awesome. Okay, so few really cool things in here that I want to go over in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about this. One, train, monorail, cable cars. Right away, some huge options for public transportation, right? New policies. A lot of the business benefactors, high-tech housing, gotta love that, and high-rise ban, right? That's gonna give us way more control over where things are being built and how they're being built. And then obviously all of the transportation infrastructure that comes there, transportation. One thing that I do want to call your attention to is that I do have the suspended monorail track. So that's definitely going to come into play very shortly. And we do have, again, all of the stations, all of the hubs, the whole kit and caboodle. So we are in business. I'm actually going to pause this right here because I think that we are going to make some massive changes to this space. We're probably going to, I hate to say this, we're probably going to raise most of this to the ground, which again, you know, this is a game. This is not really realistic in this part, especially because we just needed to hit a population that allowed us to put in some public transportation. And I think that what we want to do is just be very intentional about how we're planning this. We're going to keep the bones. I think the avenue structure is something that makes a lot of sense. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I think that we want to upgrade. Oops, let's go over here. I think that we want to upgrade this road here. It's not going to let us do that. I don't understand why here. Oh my gosh, now it's letting us do that. That's crazy. It's almost like the only thing I did was press a little button to let this little anarchy bird fly loose. Okay, there we go. So I think we want to kind of look at where our major avenues are through the city and take those bones, right? And then restructure this community grid in a way that's going to work better for everyone. So, you know, I think being a little more intentional about where we put our planned government community, our old town, and then our commercial, or rather our kind of metropolitan core center will be a ton of fun. And I think we just want to be a little bit more intentional about it. So we might kind of get rid of a lot of this and start over with our transportation options, which I think kind of defeats the purpose of having to build with these things unlocking. But just realistically, this is my first build, you know, with YouTube and with trying to work within these constraints. So I'm still trying to figure out what works best for my play style and potentially what's the most interesting for y'all to see. So we're going to do 1 or 2 more things and then call it a day. I think the first thing that we're going to do is extend our key. So we have these great key walls here. And I think we just want to extend this key a little bit more to kind of give it this really sharp edge, right? I really like how these key walls look and operate. And I think that part of what we really like about this kind of structure here is getting that really sharp look. So I'm going to build right to the edge of this rock. And then I'm actually just going to, oops, we want to use move it, but we just want to take a single point here, take this point and extend it right into the rock itself, lower a little bit. There we go. So kind of have this nice blending right there. into this rock structure. Actually, I don't quite like how that worked out. Let's take this again. We want, all right, that's maybe impossible to grab. So let's see what we can do here. Let's move this over just a little bit. Grab this, tuck it back in, and then move this back over on top of it. There we go. So it kind of has a little bit more of a natural end right in those rocks. We hit that breakpoint there. We do have a little bit of water showing up there, just a minute amount of flooding. So let's take our level tool, level it off. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. Level it off on the land, and then just kind of clean this up right along there. I think we should be in a good spot. That will either go away over time or when I go ahead and do it right there. So hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. Let's just speed this up a little bit. I wouldn't be building new property right there, buddy. That's just my thought here, especially because there is a minor tidal wave heading for your community. Okay. If you have any ideas about how we want to restructure the space that we have here, or any ideas around how we should move kind of the different sections of this main kind of plateau around this mountain, please let me know. Again, right now we're kind of thinking that this is going to be the core kind of maybe entertainment or leisure hub. I think it'd be great to have some sports stadiums down here right on the water. Old Town with these train tracks makes a ton of sense to me. And then potentially either having the seat of government over here, or I'm kind of thinking, again, I've been making these DC comparisons, but you have some of those high rises in DC, some of those high rise government buildings. We could potentially put some of those on either side of the highway here, and then kind of have a natural transition here. So let me know what you think your idea is for where along the geography of the land does it make sense for our old town to be? And where do you think the government would have formed? And where do you think that the city metropolitan center should be? I'm really curious to get your thoughts on that, along with anything you've learned about highways today, or anything, again, I've been inaccurate about. Please let me know. I'm always looking to learn. So if you know something I don't, I'd love to learn about it. And I'm happy to share on this channel, because the more that I know, the better off I am, and the more I can share with y'all. So thank you so much for joining me for this slightly longer episode of Sunset Falls, and we'll catch up next time as we plan our larger city components. Thanks for joining me.